So the topic of discussion is how to avoid the holiday gain without the restriction. A little bit about me. Most of you, like I said, know me, so I don't really need to dive into too much of this. But I have my undergrad in exercise science. I got it at the University of Toledo, where I swam for 4 years. I then went on to coach for 4 years at two different universities. I actually coached Katie at Youngstown State um, in swimming. And while I was doing that, getting my master's degree, I started competing in fitness competitions or figure competitions, which was what inspired me to get into nutrition coaching. I then went on to dabble in CrossFit coaching slightly. I got my precision nutrition certification, a CrossFit certification, and then a few years ago, I got my functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner certification, which is a long way of saying that basically I can sell lab work, read lab work, and then recommend lifestyle and supplement recommendations based on your results. So I do a lot of hormone testing as well. And then also, I am a certified life coach, which obviously, as y'all know, helps a lot with nutrition. So I want to know what your goal is this holiday season. So I'm going to ask you to participate here. If you can, unmute yourself. And I want to know what made you sign up. What are you hoping to get out of the next couple months that may allow you to have a different holiday season versus what maybe normally happens? So if you want, unmute, introduce yourself, maybe say where you're from or whatever you want to share, and then what your goal is over the next 2 months. Don't be shy.
I'll go.
Okay, perfect.
I'm Katie. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. And what I'm really hoping for is just, I don't know, trying to figure out, I mean, this is super broad, trying to figure out the general like balance of stuff without feeling guilty about it, and just, I guess in a way, setting healthy boundaries to kind of stay within what I want to be doing.
Boundaries with food or people?
Yes. It's probably more so people and navigating the people part of it.
Yeah, okay. Nadia, you want to go next?
Sure. So I feel like the holidays are always like stressful for me because it's like, well, I'm from Arlington, Virginia, sorry. And the holidays just are always hard. Like you're traveling, you're seeing family, work's crazy. And I think that this year it's just, well, I'm sure everyone's stress level is through the roof with COVID, but like it just, to me, it's like I've never been able to like just get a grasp of it. And it's like I feel like I have one moment where it's like, okay, things are great, I'm getting into a routine, like everything's fine, and then it's just like another something else happens. And so to me, it's like just not letting, usually the holidays I'm like, okay, I can like enjoy myself a little bit more than usual, where now I'm like, no, everything's just been a shit show. So it's like you have to like still focus and just trying not to be stressed out with just everything. So I pretty much feel like a hot mess right now. So that's why I signed up. I'm like, all right, these always help me.
Good. Sarah, what about you?
I'm in Southern California, feeling ultimately stressed. They're talking about another lockdown for us and all that crazy stuff. Our governor's been crazy as it is anyways, but I'm just hoping to get a little bit of the food stress that I have around the holidays, because I really love food and it brings a lot of guilt when I do indulge. So just trying to find a little more balance.
Perfect. And I don't know if Sharon can actually communicate because she's been trying to connect to audio over the past several minutes. So Sharon, if you're there, you can answer, but if you're not, we'll just pass. Let's see. Oh, wrong way. Okay, so here are a couple of the things that I talked about on Instagram, Facebook, or email regarding this conversation. I felt like probably most of you had at least one of these. If you could probably relate to a few of them. I think most of us want to obviously enjoy ourselves, but what gets in the way of that is feeling bad about our choices, feeling like we're making choices we shouldn't make. But we also don't want to feel restricted, and we're perhaps tired of letting loose, if you will, and then being 5 to 10 pounds heavier come January, and then, feeling like we're starting from scratch in a sense. So I want your feedback. You can write it in the chat if it's easier. True or false? Weight gain equals calories in exceeding calories out. I just realized I'm not sure if I can even see the chat box on the screen share, but if you guys just want to yell it out, you can. Or how about this? Oh, okay, that helped. True, Sarah. What else? Perfect. You guys are right. All right. So true. So at the end of the day, it seems complicated sometimes, and I'm sure some of you, actually, as I think of all of your situations, you probably all can relate to the fact that sometimes things seem a little bit more complicated. It's not just black and white, like, oh, I just eat less, voila, I'll lose weight. And there's a few things that factor into weight loss and weight gain. So the first thing I want to talk about is your metabolism. Metabolism impacts how much you can eat in general. So obviously, if you have a good, healthy, strong metabolism, you are going to be able to eat more food than someone who does not. The second point is there are a lot of factors that impact your metabolism. So if you can look at the chart on the right-hand side, I think you can move the boxes, at least on my screen I can. I'm not sure if you guys can on your end, but basically it's a representation of caloric expenditure. So at the bottom, from 0 to, let's say, 65, 70%, you'll see regular bodily functions, which is your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. I think they forgot. I think they should have probably labeled it RMR, so your resting metabolic rate, because that factors in as well. They just didn't factor it into this chart. But your BMR is what it takes to keep your body functioning at the very basic level. Like your heart is going, you're breathing, your brain is alive, but that's about it. Your RMR is resting. So let's say you're in bed all day. That would be your RMR, which would account for brain activity, like having thoughts, maybe looking around, not really much else. That's probably a couple extra 100 calories a day that you'd be burning. And then you have your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Any type of movement you do falls under that category. So if you're walking around, you're going to the bathroom, you're moving or fidgeting, all of that stuff is obviously burning some calories. It might not be a lot. Obviously, if you're like doing this, you're not really burning much, but over the course of a whole day, it adds up. And then the next part is the digesting food. So that would be thermogenic expenditure of food. There you go. But this is where food quality factors in. So the lower our food quality is, so let's say we're eating Doritos and Pop-Tarts, it doesn't really require a lot of work for our body to break that down into calories and consume it. Whereas protein sources, fiber-rich foods, all of that stuff takes a lot more work for the body. So I read somewhere it could be anywhere from 10 to 30% of your daily expenditure, depending on food quality, which is kind of surprising and probably also explains why that sometimes if you've ever, let's say you're eating 2,000 calories a day, you're eating really healthy, and then you make a switch to eating lower quality foods primarily, and you see weight loss stall, or maybe in your case, it might start to go up. It's like, what the heck is going on here? I'm eating the same amount of food, but you're actually burning less by decreasing food quality. And also, obviously, you have to take into account processed foods, or they're not really accurate in regards to how much calories everything has. So they're guesstimating on that. So it could be wrong, which could be actually just increasing your calories overall. And then the last part is exercise. So movement matters, but as we see, it's perhaps not as much as we think. It also depends obviously on the amount of exercising you do. So if you're working out 3 times a week and it's very light yoga or stretching, you're probably not burning that much in comparison to someone who, let's say, on the opposite end of the spectrum, trains competitively. They're burning a lot more per day, which allows them to eat a lot more food. But we all know that you don't necessarily need to exercise to change your body composition. It just helps ever so slightly. Oops. Okay. So number 3 would be chronic/yo-yo dieting can downregulate your metabolic function. So if you look at the chart on the right, you'll see that this person in the little dots, that is their caloric intake. So they're somewhere to start, and then they go into a deficit, and then they come back up, and then they go into a deficit again and come back up. Their caloric intake slightly increases over time. It looks like it according to the chart anyways, but each time they're having to go into a deeper deficit to get even close to the amount of weight loss they've had. The problem is because the body senses yo-yo dieting as a stressor, and this person isn't necessarily reverse dieting effectively. So when someone reverse diets, actually probably most of you have at some point in time, they're going from a lower place of caloric intake to slowly increasing it. And when you do that, it's kind of like trying to start a fire. When you're eating 1,500 calories a day, it's like there's smoke, but there's not much else. And so if you want a fire, you have to slowly add paper or kindling to that fire. That's the equivalent of slowly adding calories back into your diet. And then fire starts. And then the next step, once it gets going, is you can throw logs on. That's even more calories. But when people yo-yo diet and they keep crashing into these diets, the body doesn't respond very well. As you can see in that blue line on the left side of the chart, it kind of keeps dropping as to in reflection of the metabolic rate for this person. It gets worse over time because they're not taking care of their body. And chronic dieting is a little bit different. So chronic dieting is, let's say, if you're in a deficit for a long period of time, even if the intention isn't to lose weight. So let's say normal for you is 1,500 calories. You might not be consciously dieting, but you're in a deficit for probably your activity level and everything else. So what happens is the body starts slowing things down. It recognizes, okay, we're not getting enough here. So how do I survive this lack of food that we're experiencing? It down-regulates thyroid function, which slows metabolism. You subconsciously slow down in general. So it's funny, you probably don't even notice it, but when someone's in a deficit for too long, they start getting lazy. And so they'll start parking closer, they'll start cutting things out. And it's not like they're doing it on purpose. It's the body's so intelligent, it almost motivates the person to be lazy in order to conserve energy. So if you've ever gone from a deficit into higher calories, what most people say is, oh my gosh, I have so much more energy. It's because your body's feeling like it has enough to survive and thrive. So it allows you to feel able to do more and take on more. And then chronic dieting is a stressor. So anytime your body is stressed, it's going to potentially take more on, especially create more body fat in order to feel more safe. So in order for it to feel more safe and lose the excess, it has to, one, you have to minimize stress. And a big part of that is making sure you're not in a deficit. So that's also where that reverse dieting comes into play and helps people get on the right track. All right, so the healthier your metabolism, the more flexibility you can have. So if someone's stuck at 1500 calories, there's not really much wiggle room there. You're not really eating that much to begin with. You don't have as much flexibility. But the healthier your metabolism is, you can increase your intake by hundreds of calories and it really not have that much of an impact day to day on your overall weight. And also, if let's say you were following the 85-15 rule or 80-20, to where 80% of your food is really healthy, 20% no big deal, it's processed or whatever you want to have. For someone at 1500 calories, that's like a little baby snack. And for somebody at, let's say, 2400 calories, that looks like a whole meal, if not more. And then number 6, weight gain can come down to the amount of what I just called slips you have on your habits. So this little chart I made up, but it's representing what I wanted to. So when you're first starting out and you have a lot of bad habits, or you eat a lot of processed food, or you just overeat in general, any improvement will lead you in the right direction. Or let's say it's very similar to just starting a new workout routine or joining a new gym. Anytime you start something new, you're going to get better at it because you're so far away potentially from your potential. Any little thing will help. But the closer you are towards the end of this, where your physique potential is, your athletic potential, I mean, you could use this chart for anything, the harder it is to improve. And so sometimes it can seem, like, oh, I do such a good job at, eating healthy, exercising, all these things. And then I take a week off and I slip backwards. Everyone does. It just, you have to maintain a tighter habit or maintain tighter habits in general to maintain this leaner physique because it requires that. So if you want to make an improvement from where you are now, you just have to improve upon your habits. If you want to maintain where you are now, you have to maintain the habits or just create a different balance, which is kind of what we'll dive into, because obviously holidays, we're trying to incorporate things that we don't typically have into our lifestyle for the most part. So how do we compensate for that? So that way we can maintain that balance of our habits and not totally overthrow what we've been doing. So another participation, you can text it in the chat. What are some things that aren't an increase in muscle mass or decrease in muscle mass or anything related to body fat? What are other things that might impact the scale? And you all should know at least one thing because we probably have had this conversation before. Yes, Nadia, perfect. We've had that many times. So stress and sleep, water weight, yep, water retention, great. All right, so you guys pretty much hit them all on the head. So first one, muscle breakdown. So whether you've had a really hard workout or you've done a competition, I would gain multiple pounds after a CrossFit competition and hold on to it for a few days as my body repaired broken muscle tissue. That was just my feedback that my body wasn't ready to go back to training at 100% because it was still retaining the water from that competition. Inflammation is another thing. So inflammation can come in many different forms, injury being the most obvious, but it really depends on your body for the rest of them. So food intolerances can cause inflammation, which can lead to water retention. And that could be gluten or dairy for quite a few people. It can be alcohol, it can be sugar. Another sign that you can pay attention to is how are your monthly cycles? So if you typically have these specific symptoms every time you get your period. How do those change when you've incorporated some of these foods into your diet? And if things get worse, that's your cue that, well, you can either deal with it and move on and say, well, I really just want the alcohol over the next couple of months. I'll deal with the fact that my boobs hurt or whatever. Or you can change your habits to decrease your symptoms. But those will impact the symptoms that you do have most likely. And then your period, obviously, we all know every month, pretty much almost every woman experiences an increase on the scale due to that. Going to the bathroom obviously can lower your scale weight. And then water retention due to anything else, which Nadia said, stress and lack of sleep can play a huge role in that. So what does this mean? The scale fluctuates due to a lot of things outside of just our body composition changes. So day to day, those are due to water retention or fluctuations of your water retention. But the trends over time are what are due to changes in muscle mass or body fat. So as you all know, you weigh yourself almost every day when you're working with me. And over time, this chart is a little crazy because I'm not sure who gains 5 pounds overnight, but usually this is very similar. You're not going to necessarily see a very straight line in regards to weight loss. It's going to be all over the place. But it's how are we looking over the course of time? So what does our week to week look like? What does our month to month look like? So as we go through the holiday season, understand that your weight might go up slightly, especially after you've incorporated foods that you're not used to, that your body perhaps doesn't tolerate very well. But that doesn't mean that you're gaining body fat. That just means you're having a little bit of a response to what you're consuming. Most likely, if you reined things back in and ate how you normally do, it would go away that same week or that next week. So that's not true weight gain. What we're looking to do is just avoid gaining excess body fat here. And I think I might have just covered all that. All right, good. So how do we navigate holidays without gaining body fat? So here are the 8 tips that I'm going to dive into. You don't have to write all these down because there's a slide for each of them. So the first one is set daily intentions. So whether you want to journal in the morning or every day or whatnot, or if you just want to be mentally intentional, maybe you're taking your shower in the morning, before your day gets started, reflect on how you want the day to go. And so what does my day look like? What do I have going on? So that second point, what do you want to include in your day? Maybe you have a normal day and you're just going to eat normal. Or maybe it's, hey, it's Thanksgiving, so I'm going to enjoy whatever I want to enjoy. And I'm really excited about trying a little sliver of all of the pies. That's my jam. I don't commit to one thing. I have to try a little bit of everything that I want. And so I just pick a little bit of what I want and put it on my plate and I move on. But I think having some intention and knowing what you want to include into your day will help you kind of have control over it in a sense. And then how will you make choices that will support what you want to include? So Thanksgiving, okay, so how I go about that is in the morning, I eat protein and I keep things kind of leaner. So leaner on the fat, leaner on the carbs, because I know later on I'm going to indulge in those to a certain extent. So when you know you're making different choices than what are normal for you, what are some other choices that are more positive that you can make to kind of counterbalance those choices? The second one is to be present. So first of all, I feel like the holidays, yes, a lot of it revolves around food. That's I feel like every culture revolves around food, so that's pretty normal. But it also revolves around who we're with. And so how can we practice being more present with those people? Because that's kind of the point in the first place, is to be around those we love. The second point is use your senses when you eat. So allow each item to bring you joy and pleasure. If you are going to choose to eat something, enjoy it. I think that's the hardest part. It's like we want to eat something, but then we just kind of sideline those feelings because guilt rolls in. It's like, oh, well, we shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have ate this. This is not good for us. It's like we're just so not comfortable enjoying ourselves that we have to smash it by bringing guilt in. So embrace what you're eating, allow yourself to enjoy it. And when you're consuming it, like, how does it smell? What does it taste like? How does it make you feel? And just enjoy it. And then the last point is check in with yourself throughout the meal. So are you hungry still? Or are you just bored? Or are you just going up for seconds because you feel like you have to? Or are you finishing your plate because you feel like you have to? Gauge where you are so that way you can make better choices for yourself as well. Okay, and daily reflections are kind of the opposite of intentions. They're more of at the end of the day. How did my day go? What did I do well? Is there anything I could do better next time? So it's not so much, what did I do wrong or bad? It is more, what could I have done and what do I plan on doing better the next time I'm in this same situation? So yes, we're acknowledging that maybe I didn't do that great in this area, but here's a way I could improve upon that next time. So that way, the next time you're in that situation, you remember this reflection and you have a game plan. And if I included treats into my day, how did it make me feel? So acknowledging the positive aspects of actually enjoying yourself. So whether it was pleasurable, it allowed you to create a deeper connection with somebody, if it was fun, whatever the word is for you, just kind of acknowledging that, like, yeah, this is why I chose to enjoy this thing because it made me feel this way. Moderation. So instead of denying yourself, try a small portion of everything you want, if that's your jam, and then savor each bite or sip. So whether we're talking alcohol or food, I think the worst part is having to tell yourself no. And if you've ever had to do that for a portion of time, I feel like the rebound is way worse. So it's like you're like, oh no, I can't have that, can't have that. And then later at night, you're finding yourself head first in the pantry eating things you shouldn't have. And you're eating way more than you would have otherwise if you would have just allowed yourself what you wanted. So instead of telling yourself no all the time, just use the moderation in those instances. The second point is start with what you know your body needs first to feel good, and then go back for what you want on your second round. That's another method of doing it. I don't necessarily do it that way. What I will do is incorporate things that I know are good for me on my plate, but I still might also incorporate things that I just want on that first plate as well. And I might go back for seconds, and it's usually for dessert. But the important thing is you're filling yourself up on things that are good for you as well, not just crushing it. So keeping calories in check. You can track your food or your calories. That's one way of doing it. All of you have done that at some point in time. If you aren't tracking your food, you're using more of like a mindful eating or intuitive eating approach. Think of each meal should contain a protein source. So at least your 3 big meals of the day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, those should contain protein, which will help with satiety. And also, obviously, it takes some effort for your body to burn protein. The next point is consume 5 servings of veggies a day. They don't have to be 5 meals a day. It could be in 3 or 2 of your meals, but I usually recommend 500 grams. That's a pretty standard recommendation, but that will help get fiber up, which also helps with satiety, which means you have less room or less hunger to indulge in things that maybe are higher in calories. And then the last point is to stay hydrated. Sometimes our body sends hunger signals when we're actually just thirsty. It just doesn't know how to communicate. I mean, obviously, we can become thirsty, but your body can sometimes give you hunger signals as another way of asking for more water or hydration. The recommended amount, which you probably all know, is half your body weight in ounces as your daily minimum. Positively coping. All right, so what are you currently okay, so if you guys want to participate in this, I'd love it. What are your current coping mechanisms depending on how you feel? So, and we all have our go-tos. When I feel stressed, when I feel sad, when I feel anxious, I go to this. Whether it is I eat food, I drink a glass of wine, I over exercise, I shut myself in a room and don't talk to anyone. Whatever your coping strategies are. You guys can also have positive ones. But if you want to share any of the ones that you have, that would probably be fun. I'm trying to think. I've gotten a lot better at mine over time, and I think you all have as well.
Say, I know my go-to coping strategy for anxiety or for anything is obsessively cleaning.
And a funny one, Katie, that we should share is that crunchy things, right?
Yes, and crunchy things.
Like even carrots, like it's
Yeah,
I'm
just
like,
has to
oh well,
crunch.
I guess it's a positive when you're, just crushing carrots.
It's one of those things that, like, I don't know, when I do work in my office, not that we're doing that right now, the
Yeah.
lady that sits next to me like giggles at me because she can tell when I'm on stressful calls because I'm sitting there like my headset on mute, just like crunching on something. She's like, "Are you doing okay?" So
That's funny. And then Sarah said controlling other situations that I can. So inserting her control. That typically, I mean, that's a lot of people too. Nadia, do you have one?
So I've tried now to like laugh. So I'll come home from work, and because I am still going into work, and I'll be like, all right, I just have to watch a 30-minute episode of like something to just a mind-numbing show, but if it's funny, then it could at least try to get my mind off of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty positive one, you're like distracting yourself in a better way than the alternative.
Yeah.
So some questions I've probably given you all before is when you're feeling, I guess really what you want to do is create the awareness that you're actually feeling something. So it's checking in with yourself and saying, what am I feeling? And also, what do I want to feel? So when we're using coping mechanisms, usually we're feeling a certain type of way and we're trying to achieve a different feeling. And so, Katie, when you're anxious, what feeling are you trying to feel instead?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, and I'd be curious, like next time when you're chewing on carrots or you're excessively cleaning, what do you feel afterwards? Because it probably provides it to a certain extent.
I mean, that's. I think some of the like cleaning stuff is probably control over a situation, and I don't know about the crunching.
Yeah, neither do I. That was a weird one. But I would say control sounds accurate because a lot of people are that way, especially if they have more, I wouldn't call it OCD tendencies, but you know what I mean, very tidy tendencies. It's like when my house is clean, I feel like I got my shit together and I can handle this. Whereas when you're feeling anxious and things are in disarray, it's like, oh my God, what is happening? So that makes sense. And then Nadia, what are you trying to feel?
I think it's just like trying to just, if I'm like anxious or sad or annoyed, frustrated, I think it's just trying to change that feeling. Like just if I can sit and laugh, because obviously like if I'm mad at something or I'm frustrated with work, I've probably not been like enjoying myself. So like just get something to where I can just be happy or laugh or just change that mood, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I would challenge you too to like make sure you're not just shoving it under a rug. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, I'm frustrated or I'm sad or whatever, but I'll just laugh and it'll be okay, instead of allowing yourself to process the feeling and then shift into the coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because obviously sometimes that explodes or you store it as stress in your body. So part of recognizing, I mean, I don't know if recognizing what we want to feel is all that important. Sometimes it's helpful in regards to finding the right coping mechanism, but ultimately, what is something that makes you feel better? Some words that people will use are like peaceful, more grounded, um, calm, comfortable, or in comfort versus um like thinking of when people like to cuddle up with blankets and have a cup of tea. I know some people used to like eat snacks in the afternoon, not just because they felt like they needed to shift their mood of some sort. And really, it's like, okay, well, what are you trying to feel instead? And maybe it's a pick me up. It's like an emotional pick me up. Like, oh, I have a little snack and I'm working from home. There's no excitement. So this is my excitement, is this little snack. So it's like, okay, sounds great. Is there something that you could have as well that is less calories? Let's say if they were struggling to keep things in check, it's like, okay, well, can tea provide that for you? Um, Finding things like that can also provide that same feeling. Going out into nature obviously is my number one recommendation, but there's so many different ways, what I would call just taking care of yourself. But by implementing those in, that allows you to kind of move through those emotions a little bit better. And when we're feeling better, when we're taking good care of ourselves, we're less likely to make worse decisions ultimately. And then the last point is disrupt the poor habit loops that you have. So if you have habit loops of like, and coping strategies are habit loops. So when I feel anxious, I do this, or when I feel stressed, I do this. If it's not healthy, how can we disrupt the habit loop? Part of it is having the awareness that, wait a minute, I do need this cookie. I'm just stressed. What else can I do instead? I've heard clients say before, like, well, when I get home from work, I just really struggle to be motivated to work out. It's like, okay, well, can we interrupt that somehow? Can, instead of you going straight home, can you go straight to the gym or have your bag packed in your car or by the door? So that way you're making it easier on yourself versus getting stuck in what is hard or challenging. And then daily self-care. So this is important, especially around the holidays, because I feel like everyone's a little bit more stressed and anxious. And this year, I don't know, it's just confusing. So I don't, with everything going on, it's like maybe you're seeing family, maybe you're not seeing family. But either way, that's stressful for everyone, whether you're not seeing family or whether your family is super stressful. So by implementing self-care into your daily life, you can minimize at least the volcano of emotion that might be there when you aren't taking care of yourself. You're, instead of allowing it to build up, you're kind of pouring the bucket out, if you will, every day. So that way you can manage it a little bit better. So some reflection: when I'm feeling my best, my habits include what? And so I would say, make sure you think about that. And I would say, think about it tonight, tomorrow, whatever, write it down. But get acquainted with what those habits are. So that way it's not like, oh, I don't know what makes me feel good. I don't know. It's like, oh, I've noticed when I feel really good, it's because I've been doing this daily, or I work out this amount of times a week, or I do yoga, or I meditate, or I journal, or I go into nature frequently, or I get help so I'm not stuck at home with the kids all day or whatever. Whatever that looks like for you, know what you need so that way you can include that into your lifestyle so that way you don't get to the boiling over point. And then what can I do each day to proactively stay ahead of stress? And that could be A, incorporating those habits. And each day could also look very different depending on your schedule. And then when you're stressed or anxious, what are some extra self-care things you can implement? So not only should you do things that make you feel good every day, when things are rough and they're a little bit more challenging than normal, what else can you do? What are your support systems that you can put in place? Or what things do you maybe slack on when it's not all that important, but when things are more stressful and anxious are extra important? So that way you can feel like you're once again pouring the stress out of that bucket versus just allowing it to all overflow. And the last one, each meal is a restart. So just because you had something you enjoyed doesn't mean your day should be thrown away. And I think this is a very easy mindset for people to get into. It's like, oh, well, I jacked this up. So what does it matter if I do this tomorrow? It's like, well, it does matter because obviously weight gain is an accumulation of bad choices. It's not one choice that we've ever made. And so if we can just restart every single day or even a meal, every meal, which would actually be a lot quicker than every day, then we have a lot more chances of being successful in that. If you want untracked days over the holidays, enjoy them. I do not track on the holidays. I do not advocate for that. I do not tell people to do that because unless you're training for something very specific and it's New Year's or shortly thereafter to where an untracked meal might make a difference in your weight, there's no point in having to track over the holidays, in my opinion. If a day doesn't go as planned, move on to the next one because we have all been there where we have created this perfect plan and then life happened and it's a hot mess and nothing goes to plan. Just move on. It is what it is. You didn't have the control over it. It's no big deal. And then the last one is over consuming. Really, 3 to 5 days, if you think of like New Year's Day or Eve or whatnot, Christmas Eve, Christmas, Thanksgiving, like that's 4 days. So in 2 months, if you ate excessively on 4 days out of the 2 months, that's not going to do anything. So in the grand scheme of things, it's like, we'll be okay. And then, obviously it's like, well, what about holiday parties and all those things? The more frequently you have outings or you find yourself in places where you might want to overconsume or consume things that you don't normally consume, that's when keeping the moderation piece at play helps, or just making better choices at the beginning of the day to counterbalance what you might have like at a potluck, or if you go have a few drinks with people or whatnot. So the more frequently you're doing those things, which this year might not be all as frequent as normal, the more important those day-to-day habits are. But if you're just planning on not tracking on the few days of the holidays, you will be just fine. Most of you guys know this answer, but why a coach may help you. Obviously, the accountability part, getting back on track quicker, may help you navigate tricky situations. You don't have to figure it out alone. You all know I create plans tailored to your specific goals, and then the success rate dramatically increases even through the holidays. And you also know how this all works, so I don't need to explain it. So what are your questions? Oh, good. I finished early-ish. I was worried about that. I missed the chat. Okay, so Sarah just said yeah. You can unmute yourself and ask. What? Nothing? Nadia, do you have anything?
I don't.
You already know most of this stuff.
No, I mean, it is definitely helpful to kind of just like recenter, right? Like to, yeah, I feel like a lot of it, like most of us know, but it's good to like rehear it and know that like, yeah, going and, you know, having the glass of wine at Thanksgiving or eating something that you normally isn't like wouldn't, it's still okay, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think the most important part too is like it's not just diet, you know, like it's a whole pie of, you know, diet is one piece of it, but sleep is another piece, stress is another piece, and your diet could be okay, but if the rest of the pie goes to shit, like you're still going to have issues, you know? And so if you can try to make as many good decisions as possible, it counteracts dietary decisions, you know, to a certain extent anyway. So making sure that like, okay, how am I managing my stress? How am I, you know, am I getting enough sleep? And then a couple glasses of wine, no big deal. But if you have a couple glasses of wine, you don't sleep enough, your stress is through the roof. And it's like, why am I having excessive cramping this month when that's not normal? It's like, well, because everything, you know, fell apart this month. So just remember that stuff too, because that stuff's important, but it helps.
Yeah, and I like the reminder that really this stuff is just only a few days out of the whole, like this whole actual like time frame, right? Because I like what feels overwhelming to me most of the time is that like we have, you know, like for Thanksgiving, we'll usually do something on Thanksgiving Day and then something a different day with the whatever other side of the family we didn't see on that day. And then, you know, Christmas Eve is always a thing, and then Christmas Day, and then there's always like we still do both of the sides of the family on my husband's side for Christmas, and which I mean this year I don't think we're doing any of that, but like even with all of that, like it's really not that many days, and there's some of those ones that I have more control over than others. So
Yeah, it is a good reminder because sometimes it like not thinking of it in terms of numbers, it's like, oh my God, there's so many different days and options to mess this up in a way and to really let it spiral out of control. But it's like, wait, okay, so that's what, 6 days? So if I do good on the others 6 days in 2 months, it's really not that big of a deal. You know, people go on vacations for a whole week and don't track and come back, and a week later their weight's right back to where it should be. So yeah, nothing to really worry about. And Sarah, you also said you like that reminder too. Sarah, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I think it was a good reminder, like Nadia said, you know, just to kind of recenter us and reiterate these things in our head. You know, I shouldn't say we, I shouldn't project. I tend to get going in my own head and, you know, can make mountains out of molehills. And the reminder of it's only a few days and be present and enjoy and those sorts of things. It's good.
It's your lesson of 2020, right?
Yes.
You've been doing a good job with it.
Thanks. It's been a year.
Yeah, I'm sure it has for everyone to totally different ways. It's been interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, guys?
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking your evening. I know it's early for me, later for you guys. So
yeah, of course, no worries. I'm glad you guys showed up. Thank you for that. That's half the battle. So, but yeah, if you guys have any other questions, just let me know. Shoot me an email or a text. So, All right. Well, have a good night. And I'll send you guys this PowerPoint as well through email.